the title, The Dead Will Not Praise You. And the poem is for his grandfather, Cantor Berla Chagi. My grandfather emerges in a synagogue with familiar accents, unlike his noble voice, a pudgy little man, sweet tenor, coloratura, flautando. He marches down the aisle with a blue-white crown. Women ask questions, and they are charmed, and he is beloved, like etymology. Is my mother in attendance, or is she dead? What are questions now? Are the dead permitted to sing? Is he serious? Are the dead permitted to return and sing?
She's not. She's muted.
I just asked her to unmute.
I think I'm unmuted now, yes?
Yes.
All right. This is a piece called Hebrew Melody by Achron. It's not the full piece, but it's beautiful.
It's not. Make sure they can hear you. It's too far away from the mic.
Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. V'yalma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uv'zman kariv yimru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach li'olam li'olmei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemei dekudesha brichu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata Da'amiran bi'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'romav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru.
Amen.
Amen. May his memory be for a blessing.
Can you hear me now? Oh, good.
Yes, David.
So Stacy Lehman and I want to express our condolences and our heartfelt sympathy to Lindsay. And I'd like to sing just the first stanza of the Mourner's Kaddish. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rahaba v'yahoma yivrach Yerusei v'yamaliach malchusei v'chayechon uv'yomechon v'chayei dechol beis Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv V'yimaru, amen.
Amen.
Well, David took me under his wing when I was a freshman at Columbia, and his first book had just been published when he was, in fact, a freshman at Columbia, or a sophomore. And from his first book, here's a short poem called Giants. Giants are much too beautiful. They live in a house called Bigger Dimensions. They never suffer from delusions of grandeur. And I have met many giants, and this is always true. A giant will always pity you. Still, giants sleep with their eyes on their business, which mainly now is the killing of tourists. The flow is getting smaller since the end of the summer. The fall of leaves keeps many customers away. Still, I could never say goodbye to all my friends among the giants, and they have frightened all my enemies away. The giants know that I'll be strong someday, for I have planned one insuperable attack against this habit of closing my eyes when I sleep, because I want to hold on to light as long as I can, and because I want to kiss the small of your back. By David Shapiro from January.
So Kate Farrell is going to go next.
Kate has to unmute herself.
I did. I tried. There it went. There it went.
There you go. Now you're muted, Kate. You got to unmute again.
Now?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. I'm going to read David's poem, You Are the You. You are the you. You are the you in this poem, mon amour. Harrisburg, mon amour. Boats break. So-and-so asked me, to whom does a you in your poem refer? I said, are you feeling well, so-and-so? I can't believe I said it. So sue me. It's the beloved, I said, so-and-so. Oh, is that all? Well, I said, she wouldn't think it was so little. To look up into your face is like looking into the devastated stars. Lights of all kinds I traced. You and you and you and you. You are the you of this poem, Mon Amour. Boats break. Let me add that You Are the You is also the title of a new book by David, a collection of his prose due out from Mad Hat Press this September. The book's full title is You Are the You, Writings and Interviews on Poetry, Art, and the New York School. It's edited by me and has a wonderful foreword by David Lehman. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. And our next reader is Catherine Koch, who many of you will not know, but that when Catherine was 5 years old, David and Catherine were engaged to be married. Obviously did not come off, but it's always been a major thing in her life. Catherine Koch.
Thank you, Mark. You actually
I love
got
you.
the year a little wrong. David was 15, a precocious poet, and I was 7 when we met in the summer of 1962 at Wagner College in Staten Island at the New York City Writers Conference, where my father, Kenneth Koch, was teaching poetry. My father was really proud of and taken with David, introduced us. I was impressed. This surprising, fun carousel of poets and poetry included someone who was almost my age. This was the beginning of a lifelong friendship. And of course, I never, ever stopped being impressed by David. One day when I was 14, he was over at our apartment. I was complaining bitterly about my biology class. I couldn't understand how it all worked. Microscopes, experiments, slides of cells. I was on the side of the arts, much more important and comprehensible. At a certain point, David, artist par excellence, who'd been listening intently the way he did, leaned closer to me and said, "Kathy, biology is very beautiful." I think he was often trying to repair the world, tikkun olam. People we both loved intensely after they died, he would just bring them up casually as if they were alive. He comforted me with their stories. Once I visited an art history class he was teaching, and when he saw me, he veered off into infinite references to Fairfield Porter, Elaine Equi, Jane Freilich, our crowd. I'm going to read a note to me he wrote in 2015. By the way, I think he did that with all of us, casually bringing up so many references to mutual friends and loved ones. So David wrote, "They say to write anything. If I followed this advice, I would say, dear Catherine, dear Coco, sweet sister, let us live like caricatures in Much Ado and send all prayers to husbands, wives, and mothers. Like a bouquet in Nell Plain, like a wild blindness that concurs. Your father telling me to be sad tropique without sadness." So typical of my father. We walk into the parish, and what do we find? Fairfield explained as perspectives that are not blind. You start with the ground, you end with the sky, and between something, a whirlwind passes by. Ice cream for everyone, and all visitors are friends. I'm too tired to copy and very bemused when they act as if concepts have started again. Good luck with the dogs that run around the cold. Good luck with the cold. accept our prayers for the sea. Thank you.
I'm trying to find Gina Myers to unmute her.
I'm here.
Oh, wait. Oh, okay. Good.
Thank you.
I just did it. I just got it.
A song for Rudy Burkhardt. And so the snow fell and covered up poetry. And so the snow fell and covered up cities like bags of leaves. And so the snow fell and covered up an architecture. And so the snow fell and covered one red-orange sexual flower. And so the snow fell and covered the bus and the passengers. And so the snow fell and covered up our friend. And so the snow fell and covered his clear water towers, his windows, and his door. And so the snow fell and covered up the word poetry. And so the snow fell and covered up the snow and a house within. And so the snow fell on his fallen trees. And oh, the snow fell and covered up his photographs of snow. And so the snow fell and covered up even passing clouds. Thank you.
Next up, Pamela Lawton.
And so the snow fell and covered up poetry. And so the fire fell and covered up cities like bags of leaves. And so the fire fell and covered up an architecture. And so the fire fell and covered one red-orange sexual flower. And so the fire fell and covered up the bus and passengers. And so the fire fell and covered up our friends. And so the fire fell and covered the clear water towers, the windows, and the door. And so the fire fell and covered up the word poetry. And so the fire fell and covered up the fire and a house within. And so the fire fell and fell on their fallen trees. And oh, the fire fell and covered up their photographs of fire. And so the fire fell and covered up even passing clouds. This second part was published in a catalog, Pinturas, of my paintings, and also published in the New York Arts magazine. And David wrote the second poem in response to his first poem after 9/11. So the title of this is in English, because it was published in Spanish too, A Song for Rudy Burkhardt and a Song of Fire, The Towers.
Thanks, Pam.
James Bennett.
James, go.
Hello. Thank you. First of all, I should say when I saw the circulation list, I realized the only person who knows me is Lindsay. And so maybe I should explain who I am if I can. My name is Jim Bennett. I'm an antitrust lawyer. I live in Brussels. I met David and Lindsay in 1971, so we go back a long, long way. And I'm going to miss him terribly. I'm going to read a very, very short poem, which is one of a sequence that I wrote when I got the news from Lindsay this week. I was your amanuensis once, but you forgot to tell me what to write. Left to my own devices, I had to make it all up. Letters to the tax collectors, your dead children, your second wife, the deepest minnows in the stream. At night they shone like stars, where the Republic's heroes rest. Once I got a letter in return, then nothing more. Oats and oves, I scribbled on. And then suddenly, one day, sitting in the remorseless shade, I hear your voice. Thank you.
Thank you, James. My old buddy from college, Jeff Harrison, is up next. Hey, Jeff, good to see you.
Hey, how is everybody? Good to see everybody. I'm going to read, I think we sort of gravitate toward the poems that David was writing when we first knew him. So I'm going to read To the Earth, and later, if there's time, I'll read a passage from an email. To the Earth. I fell with my father through space in a space capsule as round as your thumb. My father remarked of the Earth how they had divided everything by twos or by one, a joke. It was better by far to visit the other side than stay stranded in that self. We passed the poor Americas, South Africa striped as a zebra, and Russian artists who could not practice their art, the art of the grid, while others wondered whether we had seriously judged the grid. But all over the earth, the artists painted what they wanted, except when they could not, or what they needed and did not. And my father worried aloud, knocking on the moonlit plastic module door. When we fell, we screamed, but we were safe in Texas, safe as Texas, safe as Texas in Texas, eating bread, not electrons, madly in love with the earth.
Go ahead, Jeff.
You can read
You
your
want to
note
say
too if
something
you
else?
want.
Yeah.
Was I just read it, was I muted?
No, you said you had a short something you wanted to read.
Oh, really? Okay, sure. Okay, great. So I turned on my old computer and I found all of David's older emails, and I found this passage in an email from 2008 that felt kind of like a poem. In the middle of an email, he just wrote, "But what has meant happiness to me?" And then he kind of went from there. But what has meant happiness to me? Summer as a child in hot sand like drunkenness and rapture, not knowing how cruel my parents and grandparents were, and loving music as if I were not a trained monkey, but Paganini. Listening to Glenn Gould play early English music, Said Agreed, and other music, Say Sati at age 18 in the Columbia Music Room. I always said it was like glass breaking and then recorded at a different speed backwards. All through my life, I was happy with a grandiosity all my own. But I was also cheered up by the love of women. Though because of that, I was also miserable with jealousy, envy. If I got the Pulitzer and you got the Nobel, I might be sad. I am sad that I haven't written The Wasteland, but it was already written. I saw Ann Porter at 80 get her first book nominated for the NBA. I think my greatest satisfaction is like that of a mediocre American homme moyen sensuel, that is, attending to Daniel and even just watching him play, watching him be. I want 3 more children in heaven. I like to give my pictures away. I like to practice the violin. I'd like to write 37 plays, 5 novels, 12 more books of poetry, and an aesthetic volume, say. I can't wait to get a few good obits. We are like the wounded elk still prancing about in the snow or sniffing the hunters who are also just out of sight. My students, when generous like you, have cheered me up. But really, I think the inflamed condition, says Plato, is that nothing will satisfy us. So I have gone back to 10 more years of analysis.
Thank you, Jeff. Mark Statman. I'm going to read 3 poems, and only one of them is from David, but you'll understand why. This is from Jerry Rothenberg, who we lost recently, and I noticed that Kenneth died at 77, David died at 77, Paul Auster died at 77, Jerry did not, but you'll hear echoes of something of David here. Song of a Dead Man. I do not want these flowers moving, but the flowers want to move. I do not want these flowers moving, but the flowers want to move. I do not want these flowers moving, but the flowers want to move out in the flower world, the dawn over a road of flowers. I do not want these flowers moving, but the flowers want to move. I do not want these flowers moving, but the flowers want to move. Now the cloud will break, the cloud will break, and now the cloud will break, the cloud will break, and now the cloud will break. The cloud will break there in the flower world under the dawn. This pale blue cloud will be gray water at its peak. The mist will rain down, shining and reaching bottom. Now the cloud will break, and now the cloud will break, the cloud will break. As Jeff noted, David was a great champion of Anne Porter, and I'm so glad to see Katie's here. And I think Lizzie may be in the background. I can't tell either, but this is her poem for David. Here, open at our feet, there lies a bottomless abyss of evil, a wound so deep that at the sight of it, the spirit freezes within us. For though it was not you, but we ourselves who dug this dreadful grave, you did not stop us. Why have you permitted it? This is a gulf so wide, there's no way around it. A swamp so venomous that no one can wade through it. There's no bridge over it. How can we reach our country unless you lift us up onto your shoulders and carry us across, O Lord, our shepherd? David loved the New York school. He was the New York school. He loved Kenneth, obviously, so much. I think someone wrote me, it was David couldn't go 10 minutes without saying Kenneth's name. And someone speaking in the background, if they could stop a little bit. And when in David's second book, Poems from Deal, he wrote this ode. And I hope that what we're doing right now is helping our sleeping man on his way. Ode, permit me to take this sleeping man and I will help him on his way. Even with bee and ice, my head bowed down as if I were sleepy. If I could describe how Frank's eyes fell asleep on hearing of Frank, like a painter working from a model, I could show how I went to sleep. In my ramblings, I closed my eyes and transmuted thought into a product. Moving in a trance with a keen face, I fell, and what happened to me, she knows who did this. She took my head and held it down until I swallowed. A girl walked by and said, I am Julia, open your eyes and see who I am. When I heard this invitation, she and my sleep went away together. I have something of New York in me, lying against cement to bring it back. There was almost no time between one when and the other. I mean the when of waiting and the when of seeing a woman in bed. Thus, in presenting sleep, the poem must leap over the cutoffs. You see clearly in a revolution. Look down and notice how you have slept. Stephen Paul, you're up.
Stephen, I think you can unmute now. Oh no, you're muted still. Let me.
I thought I unmuted.
Yeah, but then there was background noise, so I muted you.
Oh, I'm sorry. For David Shapiro, 1947, 2024. I can already see the wall around paradise lifting. Ecstatic, I know no difference between heaven and this moment, your garden and a bell, a violin and going crazy. The fiddle sways, and in its profile shows each note to be a detail of its own soft and infinite garden. And I guess I'll go ahead and read this short poem that David loved. I can't tell you how much he loved it, believe it or not. Let me see, okay. Request. The birds are going crazy, pounding their song into each other. After a wonderful quiet, one bird takes over. I don't know what the autonomous mover in poetry is. I suppose it's just talking. And this way I take objects and grind them into film. And after another lull, the chant becomes very conversational, a more involved chant playing off the middle notes and not the high ones. In the light of his light, we've nothing to fear. David Shapiro has attained a terrific poetry by relying on poetic devices other than reference, but you can't eliminate reference altogether, and David wouldn't want to. What he does is remove the hard connection between discourse and what it refers to, replacing it with a tacit weightlessness so that everything spills into everything else. The dizzying interplay highlighting each particle's precision. He uses referentiality as light on an already moving surface. I just think of David's poetry. Boy, David Shapiro is calling. First Marjorie died, then Jerome and Paul Auster, then David. But are we as full of them now as then? Thank you, David.
That was lovely. Next, Phil Kline.
Am I there? Oh, okay. I don't see. I was expecting to see me, but I don't. Somebody was talking about how we knew David sometimes has to do with the poems that first come to us. I first heard of David, and for that matter, Kenneth, when I was a teenager in Akron, Ohio, in high school, and I read a story about them teaching kids to write poetry. And I always tell people there were 3 reasons I went to Columbia: New York City, Kenneth Koch, David Shapiro. That was it. And I happened to be one of David's first students. And I have proof of this because my copy of the page turner says, "To Phil, fine poet and first advisee." I had asked him to be my advisor. And apparently I was the first. Anyhow, I'm going to read The Idea of a University. To have even a portion of you is the highest state to which a good article can aspire. It puts me beyond chance, necessity, anxiety, suspense, and superstition, the lot of many. Vaulters, whose hour are possessed by one pole, take exaggerated views of the importance of height, are feverish in the morning, and are startled and depressed when they happen to fall. When I am in difficulties, I originate vast ideas or dazzling projects equal to any emergencies. I can remember to whom I am speaking. This is genius, something really luminous, something really large. The earth smiles. The rocks are deranged over the sequence of ideas, too violent to last before this giant fascination, and the hand opens its 10,000 holds.
So I
Thank
think
you. And now we get Trace, I believe, right? Hey, Trace, I saw you come in.
is Trace unmuted? I did not.
I tried to get her. Hold on.
I didn't see her. Oh, there she is.
Yeah. Trace, you with us? Trace, we can come back to you. And who's next?
I think, well, Trace looks like she's connecting to the audio.
Okay. There we go. Okay,
wait,
yeah.
now
Got
she's
it. Yep, there she is. Hey, Trace, go ahead.
I don't know. Now it looks like she's muted. Oh, there. Okay, good.
Trace.
Maybe technical difficulties. So should we have Jerome Sala read and then
Yeah, let's go to Jerome and get back to Trace. Well, there's Trace. I can see you now. You're not muted. Trace, we're going to come back to you, okay? Let's go to Jerome. And Jerome, you and Elaine are now unmuted. There you go.
It says 4 bars, so.
or Trace,
Okay.
now it looks like you're there. Should Trace go? Can you speak? Oh, maybe not. All right.
Let's go to Jerome and Elaine and go and then go to Trace.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Hi, Trace. We're going to go to Jerome and Elaine and then come back to you. All right?
Jerome, you're good.
All right, you can hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay. Poem I'm going to read is called Mr. Average Viewer. Jerry Lewis once visited my home, where actually I walked in and found him smoking with a friend. I loved your program, Jerry Visits Jerry, last night, I said. Particularly when you said what you said about the war. Contra diem, Jerry, I cried. My wife didn't, but it takes quarts of milk to wet some. We both come from Newark. I asked him, is it true what they said in Waquag High about your tormenting teachers? You mean, he said, the cruel Jer. Yes, I would stand on chairs and torment them. I told them I did it too. Work with children now, just like Jerry Lewis and his marathons. You see, I watched those too. You'd like children's works. I recited one to him, but he didn't seem too pleased. Suddenly, I wondered why I had been selected for this visit. His pal said, "You've been picked as Mr. Average Viewer." Now a whole studio crew lounged by, and I prayed for you to come home.
Thank you. Elaine, were you going to read something, or do we go right to Trace?
I could read something, yeah.
Thank you.
So I just want to thank Joanna and Mark for organizing this and for bringing us all together today. And also, I would like to thank David Shapiro. I know you can hear us, David, for your generosity and for your friendship and for your very extraordinary poems. I'm going to read one poem called Snow. There are probably many more snow poems to come. I think if you did a search and found what word is most prevalent in David's poems, snow would be way close to the top of the list, if not number one. And I have a theory. I used to think it's because he was born January 2nd. And so I thought maybe he had some very happy childhood memories of snow, like snow was the frosting on his cake. It was totally amazing. But the more I think about it, I think David's Snow is much deeper and more complicated. So I'm going to read a poem called Just Snow. It begins with two epigraphs. One is by Pasternak. At first, the snow thawed quietly and secretly from within. And the second quote is by Po Chui. On few days has the dark sky cleared. Since I was born in the city of Newark, moment by moment, a very fine snow has been falling. On very few days has it stopped snowing in my sleep. The snow has widened till it joins the roofs. Elevators sink into it. In sleep, I build snow fortresses. The sleep I have slept is also snow. Snow poisonous as underpainting in Spain. Snow in the surface as wide as an exile. Snow in the airplane that almost touches your face. I advise you not to paint it. At the end of the street, I hear a snowy song. Snowbirds are lost in Chinese white snow. In a single night, parts of the car have turned to snow. Another car moves forward for science. Snow has fallen into the old bottle of eraser fluid. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine.
Thanks. I just wanted to say something, which is that a bunch of people have contacted me saying that they haven't signed up to read, but they really want to read. So once we get through the 30 people who signed up, what I'll do is just have people put their name in the chat, and then in the order that they sign up in the chat, we'll have them read.
At least at the order that we can figure out.
Yeah, something like that. But don't feel like because you didn't sign up that you can't speak.
And there's some people who have not signed up who I know I would really love to hear from, even if only they reminisce. I'm seeing people I haven't seen in decades, it feels like. And so Trace is now up, right? I think Trace.
Okay, well, this is me. Hello, everybody. I'm not sure what we've been doing so far because my internet has been down, and I apologize for showing up late. But I'm honored to be here and to celebrate David. I thought I would just read two very quick things, and I've timed this out. First is two quick passages from a book that David turned me on to, which is The Image and Appearance of the Human Body by Paul Schilder. And these are related to conversations I was having with David about gender and transition and identification. And then I'm going to read a poem of David's. So in the introduction, Schilder quotes this guy named Head saying, "It is to the existence of these schemata that we owe the power of projecting our recognition of posture, movement, and locality beyond the limits of our own bodies to the end of some instrument held in the hand. Without them, we could not probe with a stick nor use a spoon unless our eyes were fixed upon the plate. Anything which participates in the conscious movement of our bodies is added to the model of ourselves and becomes part of these schemata. A woman's power of localization may extend to the feather in her hat." Okay, and this is a passage a little later in the Schilder on identification. But what is identification in its strict definition? In identification, the individual identifies himself with persons in his actual or imagined surroundings and expresses his identification in symptoms, either actions or fantasies. He plays a role, enriches himself by the experiences of others without knowledge of the procedure. The identification takes place with persons whom we admire and with whom we are in love. And I'm going to read a poem, one of my favorite poems of David's, because I know we need to be quick, called An Afternoon with a Lion. Towards the lion and up to the lion, first you were too dazed to gaze into the lion, around the lion and with the lion. Hand over hand you were getting into the lion, sniffing palm trees and floating upon the lion, towards the lion and up to the lion. In the seventh frame you slipped above the lion, into the white sky beyond each lion, around the lion and with the lion. Now under the lion, smiling under the lion, it's a light green day edges toward the lion, towards the lion and up to the lion. But how is one to get out of the lion, one's hat and stick sticking out of the lion, around the lion and with the lion? You ran away from the lion and away from the lion, amazed and apart, days away from the lion, towards the lion and up to the lion, around the lion and with the lion.
Right. I just wanted I wanted to say like to Trace. One of my favorite memories of David is he would say, Kenneth Koch used to say, the difference between poetry and prose is obvious. It's like the difference between men and women. You just look and you know. And and then David would be like, but now we look at that and we're like, no.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joanna.
And so we have, so here's what's going to happen. We have a slight change in the order. What we're going to do now is we're going to go to Philip Lopate, who's next. So Philip, I'm about to ask you to unmute. After that, we're going to have Joseph Lease and then Alfred Korn. Okay, so it's going to be Philip, Joseph, and then Alfred. Philip, good to see you, my friend. Good to see you also.
I was very fond of David. I was an upperclassman, a senior at Columbia when I first met David. Over the years, I've known him to be not just a great poet, but a lovely guy, kind, and a mensch, which is not always the case with great poets. In fact, it's very rare. I have a feeling that David did not always get the appreciation and the acclaim that he deserved. And I think it ate at him, but he tried to control it, and he did a good job of that. But maybe today we're giving him some of the acclaim that he certainly deserved. I'm going to read a poem called The Lost Golf Ball. Part of the universe is missing, sings or says a newspaper, and I believe it, even most of it, as tape runs out of a typewriter. Big surprise, and it won't do to go looking for holes or changes in the constitution of matter. Like a rare jewel in a crossword puzzle, or yourself as an answer, linking and locking up space in the accidental field where you stumble like a star lost on a white ceiling. Parts of the universe are missing. The random minor stars you improvised litter the mind, but might not go out. Damned to hell, not what you are, but where are you, my poem? Nothing is left but the recantation, the repetition in a glut, miraculous as evil, joining the democracy of pain as if to improve it. A woman like Venice and like Venetian blinds, opening and closing, part of the universe is missing. Missing. Is this our bedroom or planetarium? The title could be an inducement, like a lost ball, though it never appears in the final painting. Though anything might, a buried ship. The title is a nude, but the title is not a can opener or a handle for a pot. Sometimes what is lost does make an appearance, however, taking a common revenge, like a word. Losing the lost golf ball, find the lost golf ball. The title itself is a ceiling for stars that shine at night, will not fade, and stick by themselves like a slogan. You have made my room a universe, as you said you would. So now we know what part of the universe is missing. It's David Shapiro.
Well, I think Joseph Lease is going to go next.
Hi.
And then Albert Korn.
Hi. Hello, everyone. And Lindsay, our deepest condolences from the bottom of our heart to you. I just want to say quickly what I think everyone here already knows. David was and is one of the greatest poets of our time, and was and is one of the greatest human beings of our time. And I'm going to read two short poems. This one from House Blown Apart is called To a Swan. And of course, it's for Daniel. Then you were born, bit by bit, seeing silent and exciting. You wanted to etch mental pain in the dust. Then you were born out of buildings and pleasures and windows and the cold, painful, and colored, and the cold, painful, and colored and fastidious as a pill in a river. Words bitterly little and alive. Then you were born, swallowing, dismissing, and rising. Then you were born, angry and artful as a blue-white swan. Then you were born, painting loud appearances. Then you were born in the right place like a thumb and a tongue. Then you were born, the animal in detail, impure and good. Then you were born, breaking up rain, ice, and information. Then you were born, fanatic nut to crack a riddle. Then you were born, made new. Then you were born, nude, new, and dissimilar. Then you were born in a lake like hidden art. Then you were born like a baked sculpture. Then you were born, silent, repetitive, and good. Then you were born, swallowing, blue-gray, and nude. Then you were born, blind as usual and tempting like a tongue. Then you were born out of fanatic architecture and repeating windows like art in a lake, like a pill in the rain, as an angry swan in the cold dust swallows and rises in the cold wind. And this one, which is a very short poem, is from David's book, In Memory of an Angel, which came out in 2017. for the Jewish objectivists. Seeds or snow? Not everyone can tell. There is a blessing for being blessed and a blessing for catastrophe. But is there a blessing for a house split open by seeds of snow so that everyone sees through you as if you were a gray door?
Thank you, Jez. As you can see, guys, we're kind of because of different obligations, we're playing around a little bit with the order of things. We've got Alfred coming next, and if you look in the chat, you'll see it's Alfred, and then Suzanne, and then Jordan Davis. So, Alfred, please take it.
Renata.
Oh, Renata. Oh, Renata, you're next. Oh, Renata is next. Whoops, my bad. Thank you, Joanna.
Wait, no, it's Alfred and then Renata. And
Alfred, Renata, yes. Sorry about that. It's a lot to manage. There's a lot of people here, which is so great. Okay, Alfred.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alfred Korn, and thanks to Joanna and Mark for hosting this, and best wishes to Lindsay. I had originally asked to read the poem that David wrote for Jan Palach, but then Joanna said that John Hejduk's daughter wanted to read it. So that's fine. As a substitute, I'll read the little speech he gave at the commemoration ceremony for Palach. Maybe you don't know the circumstances. Jan Palach was a young Czech student who, in I think 1969, self-immolated by fire to protest the Soviet crushing of the Prague Spring. And so David wrote a poem, I think around 1990, about that, and that led to, I don't know all the circumstances, it led to an invitation to come to Prague, and they were going to set up a memorial for Palach, and John Hejduk and David were going to participate. I first read David, I think the first book of his I read was Man Holding Acoustic Panel, and after that, the Devil Trills Sonata book. And then I came across an essay he contributed to David Rosenberg's anthology of essays about the Holocaust. And I said, I really have to meet this guy. But somehow we didn't meet until sometime in the 90s, some gathering, I've forgotten what. And after that, we became friends and exchanged emails. And he ended up on Facebook, so did I. And we exchanged hundreds of messages there and emails and so forth. And I was very fond of him. We had many subjects in common, the New York School of Poets, our reverence for Meyer Shapiro, the art critic, and then, Jewish type subjects or great writers like Proust and Celan and Kafka. And I love David's mixture of seriousness and playfulness, because after all, seriousness is kind of funny and playfulness is serious. And he never said anything nasty about it. He might sometimes, there would be a little bit of tone of ironic humor about something. He never said anything nasty about him. And that's pretty damn rare amongst poets. So I was upset to hear the news, but we're all here and we're very fond of David. So here's the introduction he wrote for the commemoration of Jan Palach. It's to honor Jan Palach and for President Havel. I was in Cambridge, England in 1969 when I read of the act of Jan Palach, of his amazing words, of his funeral, and of the words of his mother. I read of the march, which was so silent, even the birds could be listened to. And I wrote my little poem in awe of Palach's great courage. For years, my friends and I had tried to be courageous against what we thought was an immoral war. We were timid. Some were audacious. We did a little. We were humiliated. Perhaps we succeeded a bit. I had lived through the terrible assassinations, and I recall that I felt honored when a stone struck me at Columbia University, when I said that I hoped that what we were doing honored the memory of Martin Luther King. When I read of the sacrifice of Jan Palach, I was reading of a heroism toward which I had aspired but recoiled. But it is not for everyone to be such a sacrifice, as many have said, and it is not even easy to be a disciple of such a hero. Indeed, Pollock finally asked others to refrain from a mechanical martyrdom. Now, I'm lucky to have known an architect who draws angels and who refuses to participate. I was more than lucky to have been asked, almost by accident, to meet a Polish cultural advisor of the new Polish government in New York, the painter Józef Skalnik. And in Mr. Skalnik, I met a man with whom I wanted to share this architecture and my poem. He had lived it. He also gave me the honor of introducing me to Mr. Miroslav Mazak, who immediately asked to meet Mr. John Hejduk. We were invited to Prague, but we shrank from asking for anything of this inspiring new government. My dream was to give something back to you, the image of John Pollock, your torch number one, as he called himself, the image of your country in resurrection and victory. Amazing, too, to come in a week of other martyrdoms, other solemn funerals, 3 in Moscow. When I wrote my poem, I wanted to raise a lament as true as that lover of truth, Jan Hus's phrase. And I am so proud to collaborate with John Hejduk in the Prague of my heroes, Kafka, Rilke, Milena Jasenska, who said, "Fear nothing, tell the truth," and the children of Terezin who appear in their drawings. Each article by Timothy Ash about you in your year of the truth was like a miraculous reward for Pollock's act and your innumerable intransigent acts. We read each page of your letters from prison, Mr. President. This is Václav Havel. As you demanded of others elsewhere, an ethical mirror of Pollock's act. Czechoslovakia has been for us like George Bataille's image of the sun. It warms us and gets nothing in return. In honor of you then, and for the people of Czechoslovakia, we thought of bringing you our little gift, our little gift of your own son. Thank you.
Renata Hejduk. Oh, is she unmuted? Forgot.
She is. I thought I had unmuted her. Sometimes we unmute and then it gets muted again. Renata, you should be able to unmute.
Oh, now, will you also unmute Jim Williamson? Because he and I are going to read together, if that's
Sure.
okay. Thank you so much. While you're doing that, I just want to thank you so much for putting this together. I can't imagine a world without David, and my earliest memories in many ways are David and Lindsay. When I was a little girl running around the Institute, they were always there. And so he and my father were best friends. I'm sure everyone here felt they were David's best friends, and you were. They spoke every day. I would hear them reading poems to each other, or eating. My father would eat ice cream and talk to David every night. And in 2016, we had the honor of consecrating the memorials in Prague on the river right by the site where Jan Pollock immolated himself. And David and Lindsay, we were there together, and David read his poem. You can all see it on the Associated Press that day, and the snow was falling that day in January, as it was when Pollock was during his funeral. So this idea of snow is so, it just resonates through everything. We've decided, Jim Williamson and I and Kim Skapich and Stephen Hillier have been working on a book for the last 5 years on the story of Jan Pollock and Václav Havel, my father, and David Shapiro. And if it weren't for David, obviously none of this would have ever happened. And to honor him, I just thought Jim and I could read together today. So I'm going to read, then Jim's going to read, and then I'm going to read, then Jim's going to read. So I'll start now.
Hey, Renata, can you confirm that Jim is in there? Because we've been having a little trouble making sure.
Jim, are you? Oh, let's see.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right,
Thank
great.
you.
All right,
Got it.
Jim, I'm going to start. Okay. All right. The funeral of Jan Pollock. When I entered the first meditation, I escaped the gravity of the object. I experienced the emptiness, and I have been dead a long time.
When I had a voice you could call a voice, my mother wept to me. My son, my beloved son, I never thought this possible.
I'll follow you on foot halfway in mud and slush. The microphones picked up. It was raining on the houses. It was snowing on the police cars.
The astronauts were weeping, going neither up nor out. And my own mother was brave enough, she looked. And it was all right. I was dead.
I'm sure like everybody, and I don't want to take up too much time, we've all been looking through our emails and finding incredible exchanges with David. And I found this one the other day, and I just wanted to just read just a little bit of it. He said, as a poet, I'm so proud of this moment. When I was 21 or so, and the poem and the book in which it lies were nominated for the National Book Award, I was perhaps the youngest poet ever to be a finalist in this national way. I read the poem all over the world. When President Havel has been in America, I place special emphasis on this union. My poem was conceived while the funeral events were taking place. The very words I used had sanctity as coming from the lips of Pollock's mother. He was a martyr, we often said, and his suicide was that of a martyr, as Havel said. I felt this poem was my best, published often in this country and in other languages. So thank you for letting us read that poem today.
Yes, thank you everyone for this fabulous event.
Is Suzanne Frank here?
Yeah, she is.
Oh, okay. Did you unmute her?
I just did, yeah.
Okay.
So we've got Suzanne and then Jordan and then Deborah. Suzanne, you're unmuted.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, this is a tribute to David and his poem House. David lives and leaves not only Lindsay, his intimate partner, and Daniel, dear son, and the other remainders of his family, not only because of his art, music, and poetry, but due too to his inimitable, bubbling personality. David's voice, hushed, fawn-like, sometimes resounding in a buzz, it seemed to me, but mostly it was musical, so fitting for the poetry of his violin. So worldwide arms in interest, so discerning in taste, except for his Diet Coke habit, so innocent of step in the naughty habit. So his poetry was sophisticated to the nth degree. When David proposed to me suddenly to write a piece on your Eisenman house, I went loco to the extent that I said, I don't want to do it alone. And then he said, I'll help you take up the slack. In another shift in architecture, building, it must be said that David was best friends with John Hejduk and Andrew McNair, those two architects, warm-hearted architects he palled with. They formed a trio in architecture students' campuses. Well, David wrote a scenario about how I could write about House 6, making a written volume with the gravitas of Whitney Library of Design, with Roberto de Alba editorialing at the helm. But cleverly, David made this slim volume partially his own, with a collaboration of contributions, including his own house poem, so gloriously alive, with alphabetic letters meeting each other. It was placed opposite to my husband Dick Frank's North by Northwest photograph of House 6, the best of show visually, but stunted in growth in comparative relation to the long outpouring of interesting, poignant sounds of David Shapiro's house. I'll miss you, David.
Thank you, Suzanne. Hey, Jordan, you're up. And then Deborah. Jordan? I unmuted you. Doing it again.
There, no, it didn't work. Try again. Ah, good. Here we are. Hi. It's a very David, that prompted a very David-like feeling in me, which was savage impatience. It's so good to see everyone. It's so good to hear David's words. My condolences to Lindsay and Daniel. I'm going to read the second half of the poem after a lost original. And the second half is called "The Snow is Alive." The snow is alive, but my son cries, "The snow is not alive. The snow cannot speak. The snow cannot come inside. You cannot break the snow." But the snow is alive, and the tree is angry. 2. I was afraid into again. Where can I find you, tall flower, redolent of the divided spring? Thanks.
Now Deborah Shapiro is going to read. I don't know if she's unmuted.
Getting there. She is. Deborah, you are now unmuted. Apologies.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I cannot thank you enough for having this. My brother, I'm David's youngest sister, 13 years younger than he was. And some of you may know that we wrote 5 songs together. That the poem that was in January when I was just very, very little, like 4 or 5. But anyway, I'd love to read a family slide because it's about all of us family and it is so personal. And, sometimes David was very esoteric in talking about the universe, and sometimes he was just family. And this actually, I could imagine him writing a poem now about all of us here, because that's what he did. So we were just, do you remember the old days when someone would bring out a slide deck and bring down the big white slide and we would all be watching ourselves, and who knew that at the time he was actually remembering and putting this together, a family slide. Family on the slide, you should say. See if this slide fits. It rained yesterday. It rained today. I told you we had duplicates. Oh no, it's in backwards. It doesn't matter. Debbie's right. That's the reverse. It doesn't matter. Is this my 16th birthday? All my fancy friends? Judy looks gorgeous, but her friends all look strange. Slender and vital is a cliche. Who are these people now? People you no longer know. Who are these old women? Are they young women? Stupendous, horrendous, tremendous, and the 4th word is hazardous, hazardous, hazardous. Huh? Everybody had a hint. Just remember, Mother had the same hint. Is it a popular word, Walter, in everyday use? It may not be in use every day, but it could be in use every day. Momentous, momentous. Oh, that's when we wanted Naomi to compete in the Greenwood pool contest, but she wanted nothing to do with it. Good. Why? Why? We don't believe in beauty contests. I believe in beauty contests. Who is this person? That's you, and what's more, that's me sitting behind you. Know thyself is a famous expression. Genote thee sauton, but who said it in English? Pass the next slide, please, and don't ask who. Don't worry about the viewer. The batteries are rechargeable. Through photosynthesis, we're rechargeable too. Once in a while, Irv took a nice picture, like the one of Judy in Binghamton looking like a violin. And here is David playing on the shore. Mr. Eisenberg says, "Let me out and let the dog in." Lao Tzu says doing nothing was the way to get along. And little Debbie knows the dynasty. The bending reed won't break, they say. But Mother says, if you bend it enough in the same place, it may. Very sad. Can I read one more?
Of course.
Okay. This is my favorite, one of my favorite songs, favorite poems by David. It's called Snow at Night, and nobody read it, so I'm going to read it and try not to cry. Hold it together. When they took Albert Einstein home, he put on some casual clothes and took a walk. They gave him the ice cream special called the Balt. The violinists were leaving, but not rapidly. They remind me of time, Albert said, always going, but never gone. But it's only 11 o'clock, I said. Albert pointed to his cone, thumb first and then to himself. Albert and I nibbled our ice cream cones. We looked out the window and said nothing. Both of us finished our cones at the same instant. Under a lamp, he gave a student his umbrella. The snowflake kept falling on the notebook. In Los Angeles now, Einstein felt the earth shake under his foot. The second fiddler was Queen Elizabeth, tea under the chestnuts and a walk through the grounds, passing on the king's regrets for being away, adding, "You came down from your peak of knowledge and gave me a shiny glimpse." Einstein finished his ice cream and handed the waitress some money. The waitress gave him his change over the counter. She thought about the tip. The ice cream and the snowflakes and the earthquakes. It didn't work out and he didn't like it. He had put the knife in someone else's hand. It was very hard and he hated it. Thank you. Thank you for loving my brother.
I have to say that in not my last book, but the book of poems before that, I have an Einstein poem and it's a direct tribute to that poem. I love that poem so much. Alex, you're next. Alex is on. Alex Dunsing, I unmuted you. Oh, resend the request. Yes. There we go. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you very much. First of all, I mean, David had this wonderful ability to take this world of ours, which is sometimes ordinary, sometimes strange, and sometimes awful, and infuse it with this incredible backstory. And that backstory, I look at, so many of you here on the screen, and I realized that, so much of that backstory was the stories that he would tell all of you, and it really made life amazing. And so, first of all, I want to send my condolences to Lindsay and to Daniel, to Debbie, and to all of you. I'm really grateful that, late David included you in that backstory. One of the stories that he told was that I'm about to read Week Park in the Dark, and he told me that he really did see God in dungarees at announcing that he was going to destroy the bulwark at Deal. And so on my 30th birthday, or the day before my 30th birthday, I drove down to Deal. I slept in my car, and I woke up and went to go and see the reconstructed bulwark that God said would be destroyed. And so I wanted to read this poem, Week Park in the Dark, just dedicated to Joe Chernovallo. And the part where he says that he saw God in his dungarees, that's to the best of my knowledge, a true story. Week Park in the Dark. Oh, the other thing is that I unfortunately share some of the filing habits of David. So I lost my copy of the book, Burning Interior, so I had to get it off of an MP3 recording, which I did leave in the chat. So if I messed up some of the words, I apologize. Week Park in the Dark. Oh, Joe, we walked across the lake. That's no way to walk. You loved each bug in the cosmos. You had no job. Oh, Joe, it was an homestead almost, with ducks and a truck and a temple on top. Women washed their cars, and you loved the baby under Lacey incubation with your engineer's respect. Oh, Joe, Allen Ginsberg walked beside me, confessed his visions might not be real. But I had seen God in dungarees in daylight in the waves of Deal predict the destruction of the bulwark, Week Park in the Dark. And you read the conscious lake, oh Joe, full of the dignity of the seasons. Your school, you explained. I see the words around the emotion, then I write them down. It was your system of the spider web. You were sad, but couldn't explain. Missing you now like an oak in 1962, or the word oak. I see your spider web, I write it down. Open to me, Week Park, where the shadow of a cloud passed over as I lay on my back in the sunny court as I lay on the lake in the boat, thinking I could never die. But thank you so much, David, for all you gave to me. There's one story that he told me once that his father was oftentimes, very insistent that he practiced the violin. And one time I think David was tired and his father said, "There'll be time to sleep when you're dead." And so I want to say, David, sleep well, my friend. Sleep well.
Next up is Deirdre Kovac, and I'm not sure if she's muted. I have to check.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. I was originally going to read You Are the You because I love that poem so much, and I wanted to thank the woman who read it for the really beautiful reading, and thank you, Joanna, for setting this up. House of the Secret from After a Lost Original. I met the old dead poet and told him I no longer loved my work as I had when a child or even 15. Sorry I had not written someone else's poem, but it was already written. He told me, never think of others or of yourself, never do anything for others or for yourself, and never write poetry for another or for yourself or yourselves. The secret hangs from the top like a prayer on a branch. It is the house of secrets, narrowing to the last story, or the house of the secret, singular. And I wept, wondering where he had concealed such bitter sense. The camera was hidden under the floor like a boat. The poem hung from the branch above the silver bridge. Criticism that does not end. Even in paradise, we think it is a bridge because it is silver. It is not a bridge. Lost is lost.
That was, oh wait. That was so beautiful. That's one of my favorite poems. Oh wait. No, I'm not muted. Okay. Yeah, that was beautiful. My friend Alicia Jo is here with me, so she's going to take over my screen.
Hi, everyone, and condolences to Lindsay and to Daniel. I'm Alicia Jo, and here's what I wrote about David for today. David was my first creative writing teacher. He was a brilliant mentor, role model, and literary confidant. David was a poetic showman. With language and on the violin, he could do anything. He was a consummate creator of mystery and magic. He loved to call and play the violin over the phone. His speech itself was poetry, a stream of consciousness and connection and camaraderie, combining vast realms of knowledge and imagination. When my son Jonathan was born, David gave me a book of aphorisms by the 17th century German mathematician George Christoph Lichtenberg. The inscription included both David and his own son Daniel Jonathan's names, set off by a delightful musical staff. David was a genius. Our student nickname for him was the Velvet Prince, because he often wore a blazer made of velvet, through which his heart of pure gold always radiated. An aphorism of Lichtenberg's reads, "It always saddens me when a man of talent dies, for the earth has more need of such men than heaven does." Thank you, David. Rest in poetry. All my love. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And our next reader is Charles North, and he'll be followed by Ron Padgett. Hey, Charles. Hey, Paula. Good to see you
Hi.
both.
How you doing? Am I audible?
You're on. We got you.
Okay, I'm going to read a poem, one of my favorites, but a couple of tiny things first. The poet Tony Toll, who went way back with David and was a friend and also a wonderful poet and friend of mine, wanted very much to be here, but he's in the hospital recovering from a procedure. He sent me a tiny, he's doing okay. He sent me a tiny thing, asked me to read it. Very small anecdote, which suggests how far back he goes with David. 60 years ago, when Frank O'Hara showed me the work of this 16-year-old New Jersey high school student, who I'd never heard of and certainly never met, I was astonished and told him that it made me feel like going out and falling in love. And Tony ended by saying, I wish I could be with you to read one of David's beautiful poems. And the other tiny thing is I came across an intro I had written for a reading in 1977 at MoMA, a sensational reading which David gave with two of his favorite poets and friends, Joe Chervolo and Frank Lima. I'm just going to read a tiny bit of it, and then I'll read a poem. I once had the experience of hearing David Shapiro play a Bach sonata on the violin from about 3 feet away, which nearly took my head off, but thrilled me. I had played clarinet in a number of orchestras when I was young, but had never heard anyone that good that close. It seems to me that his poetry aspires to the condition of music, a special modern music that includes the most radical disjointedness, as well as liberal doses of formidable intellect. One of his favorite forms is a 4-line stanza, an innocent-looking vehicle for all sorts of outrageous syncopation and action going on inside. David's poems are witty and also tender. His seemingly endless inspiration includes the use of collage, chants, textbook language, and complete non sequitur. But for all the outrageousness of tone and everything else, I detect an elegiac undertone almost throughout, which along with his remarkable ear, holds individual poems as well as whole books together. And I thought apropos what Tony said about stumbling, being very excited to stumble on David's poems very early, I thought I would read a poem from January, which is still one of my favorite books. It's a little over a page. It's called The Will, in 3 parts. 1. I know the party of the sun dirigent and wealthy over the hair, the sun of round Cancer on the gray breasts of the sky. And I understand that the commitment of the intellect is pitiful, even in the stage of the lapse of mind, where the speech is senseless and the jaw kind and calm as a child's mouth. Then fathers, moping in the stove of the sun, grieve all their school and tears of a will that drove them so, the intellect and changes of the sun. But when the jaw falls and the stars are perfect depressions in the sky through which the wind dwindles, and through the stiff oak branches, I can see the advantage of literature to the mind. And at last, I become serious in this room with a smile, and the directions of the wind and sun outside this room remind me of where the brown fields in the wind and the park become silent. And I notice also, distinctly and quietly in this room, the insinuations of men turning to their wives in the descending cars. 2. That fit of one heart is a predicament. But what arrives? What arrives like the monk of the flesh? Who is that gaping guest rules in the kingless blood and makes us men? I hear the paltry wind bang at the homely boughs, and the highways of men turn to their wives under the moon. What rings the sky and the cloud? What drives the sea? What visible hero and what dark face of this woman who takes her hands from her cheeks and holds the infant up to tears in the night as the ragged boys congratulate and borrow from the heart of the lady holding the infant in her well-being, and the screams of the infant born again and again in the dark to every citizen of a name. 3. When shall we wake to the recession of dreams? Is it to wish the rose the prophet of the loam, or the August sky the ethic, or the August star the ethic of the sky? Tonight the children wish they had made friends. And those weapons which separate us from the sun and from each other, the will shall keep from all imagining, born of an outburst and cudgeling light, so that all who survive the mind of a man are wealthy men who are defended and understood, and those who grip an hour of blood within their hands and die of silence in the year of reasonable men. Thanks.
Thank you, Charles. Hey, Ron.
Yes. Hi.
I won't even say it. I love you.
Thank you, Mark. This is a wonderful event. It's wonderful everyone is able to get together like this and remember David. Like Tony Toll and Catherine Koch, I met David around 1962 also, and immediately was annoyed by him because he wouldn't stop talking, and he was so smart, and I was quite envious of him. I couldn't believe how not only precocious he was, but how good his work was. And a few years later, 64, I was in Kenneth Koch's office at Columbia, having a chat with Kenneth. And near the end of the time period we had allotted, Kenneth leaned over toward me and said, "Ron, David is coming. Be nice to him." And so David did knock on the door and came in, and I was nice to him. I wasn't standoffish. And I realized as I left the office a little later, I actually liked this guy. Just all of a sudden, because I had been forced to be nice to him, I liked him. And then over the years, I realized that I had grown to love him. But I never did shake my envy of him. He was so good. I'm going to read a short poem. Oh, and by the way, Deborah, her reading, I mean, she really channeled David. I thought I couldn't believe it was as if David were on the screen, but he was a woman. It was fantastic. And I can't do that. But I'll read this short poem, which he wrote with his son, Daniel. It's called The Boss Poem. Are you the boss of God? You are the boss of God? Nobody is the boss of God. Not me, you. Are the angels the boss of God? Are you more famous than angels? God orders himself to do what he wants. I am the boss of this poem. I wrote. I mean, David, with all of his magnificent lyricism and the sometimes the melancholy and the sadness of his work, he also had an incredible sense of humor. And with that, I just want to say that Lindsay and Daniel, I'm thinking of you a lot. So thank you.
So just so everybody knows, Joanna and I have been in the background working on the list and stuff like that. So here's, Joanna, this is how it goes. It's going to go Tenny, Jan, Lizzie Porter, Alina. Is that how we're going to go? And then we'll keep announcing that after that. Am I right?
Yeah, that sounds good. And I think after Alina, people can start putting their name in the chat so we can.
Yeah, people send. Yeah, there's some of the names that we've got are people who have written to us and said, "Hey, I want to." So it's a good time to do that. So Tenny, who goes as DRZ, who I'll just a quick tiny story. Tenny and I met when we were taking Fuhrman poetry, and Siri was in that class, Siri Hustvedt, and Tom Savage was in that class. Tenny, I don't remember who else was in it, but it was great. We studied with Kenneth and studying with Kenneth. Well, at any rate, Tenny, it's good to see you. I think I unmuted you. There you go.
There we go. Thanks, Mark. And thanks, Joanna and Mark, for organizing this. It's wonderful to be here. I think it was Jeffrey who said that we tend to go back most often to the book that David published when we first knew him. So for me, that's Lateness. And in a second, I'll read a short poem from that. I just want to say that I met David as a first-year graduate student at Columbia when I was in his American Poetry Seminar. And I thought it was a little odd that he was the same age that I was. And then I thought it was really odd that he was my graduate instructor, but he was himself still a graduate student. And I thought, what on earth is going on here? And as will be no surprise at all to anybody here, it became instantly apparent exactly what was going on there. And studying with him was completely life-changing. And knowing David and his poetry has been one of life's really great gifts. So this is just a short poem that I keep coming back to from Lateness. Stay, 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 stay. It is snowing on the kindergarten. It is snowing on your eyelids. Love's dice are manias and fights and Anacreon rights. You are standing on my eyelids and your hair is in my hair, as Paul Eluard says elsewhere. And what do you say? I say, stay, 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 stay. Streak intrinsicality. Thank you, David.
So now I think Liz Porter, I'm not sure if she's unmuted.
Schmizzo, where are you?
But
Oh, she might be under Elizabeth. Duh. There she is, Liz Balzer. Sorry about that, Liz. You're unmuted.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Mark and Joanna, for organizing this beautiful memorial. I'm privileged to be here, and I want to give my heartfelt condolences and my so sorry for the loss of our dear friend. My condolences to you, Lindsay and Daniel and Debbie. Thank you for allowing me to be here. I was recalling a memory of my mother, Anne, who David, they were good friends. And Anne remembers David playing his violin in the grocery store, playing his beautiful concert music in the aisles of the IGA or whatever it was when he was visiting them. And I just want to say that I can't tell the story of my mother, Ann Porter, without David, because David really launched her in her writing career as an octogenarian. She became a rock star, and that was because David asked her innocently enough, and she said, "What would you like for your birthday, David?" And he said, "I'd like your poems, copies of your poems." So my mother got very busy, and she was a very disorganized person, and she got on her typewriter and she started typing up all these poems that were on envelopes and pieces of paper, and she typed them all up just to give them to her good friend David. And David turned around, and to my mother's great shock and surprise, David sent them to a publisher who agreed to publish them. And this changed my mother's life. She had became a published poet. She gave poetry readings in her 80s and 90s. And I want to say to you, especially to David's family, that she called her book Living Things. And I find that her poems are living things, and they pop up everywhere in the most unexpected places. She said, our poems are like warthogs in the zoo. And she said how they pop up everywhere. And I know that David's voice is going to live and surprise you in much the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you so much. Alina, you got that, Joanna?
sorry.
Did you get Alina?
I
got it.
I got it now.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. And apologies, I'm in a car, and if I do drop out of Wi-Fi, that's the reason. Thank you so much for putting this on, and I'm very sorry for David's loss. I'm going to read a poem after poetry. Now that I have given up poetry, the gift of poetry, governed, or rather that poetry has given up me, cleaned my pond, how green my pond, or rather that poetry died in my lap, any lap, like a lousy lover in another language, and I, a Luddite, with a laptop in his lap. And now that my son is subtle and malicious as a god, any god, and bestrides the dogmatic world as if it were a tennis court, the clouds pass by, almost inhuman, like passers-by, the mountains like churches, and the churches like mountains. Beautiful and untranslatable, a woman walks past the park like a street, or a scream, or a double and triple loss of meaning. And I think whatever nothing we actually worship, to change nothing and the important thing, to leave the world alone, largely uninterpreted, for the wet pavements on which he may scratch his palms. Thank you so much.
So we're at a point where, Joanna, do you want to take the, like,
Susan?
yeah.
Oh, no, wait, Jan hasn't read yet.
Well, Jan hasn't read, and then we've got Victoria and Michael, Lawrence, Chris, and Susan Yelovich.
Yeah,
and
and also
anybody else.
Mikhail Govrin.
That's Michael. Yeah, I've got that. That's yeah. That he's right after Victoria. So it would be Jan, Vicky, Michael, Lawrence, Chris, Susan. And if you're someone else who'd like to read, please just let us know, because everyone is welcome. Everyone is welcome. This is, and I don't know, Lindsay, if you're going to want to say a few words when we bring this all home, but we'd love to hear from you too, obviously. So, who did I say was out?
Victoria.
Yes, Victoria.
I'd like to offer my condolences to Lindsay and the entire family. My name is Victoria Lomotete. I had the opportunity to be the night shift caregiver for Mr. David Shapiro from May 2022 to February 2024. I always refer to him as my master because he likes it when I play the song Jerusalem by Master KG. David has a pleasant personality and it was always fun to be around him. We share some of his pleasant memories, including traveling and teaching in various countries across the globe. We read most of his poems and recited Shakespeare plays. Each time I come to work and find him sad or down, I'll ask him what kind of songs he likes, and we will play them on YouTube. One of his favorite songs was Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. Each time I play that song, you see him raise his right hand and starts dancing. We shared a great moment together. Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and let perpetual life shine upon him. O death, O death, O death, thou have laid your icy hands on another brilliant soul. 1,000 words will not bring you back or bring him back. No amount of tears we shed will. Death is inevitable for all of us. At last, David, your labor and pains are over. We wish you eternal rest in God's bosom. Rest well, my master. Rest in perfect peace. I would like to play just a little bit of his favorite song, Hallelujah. Thank you.
Next up is Jan Freeman.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be with all of you today. Thinking and speaking about David and hearing all of his poems. I first met David through Tori Dent in 1985, and he was her mentor, and he became my mentor and friend, and has just been an essential part of my life ever since, he and his poems. I too will read An Afternoon with a Lion, which it's true, Jeffrey. This was, I think, the first poem that I read of David's, and I love it. An Afternoon with a Lion. Towards the lion and up to the lion. First you were too dazed to gaze into the lion, around the lion and with the lion. Hand over hand you were getting into the lion, sniffing palm trees and floating upon the lion, towards the lion and up to the lion. In the seventh frame you slipped above the lion, into the white sky beyond each lion, around the lion and with the lion. Now under the lion, smiling under the lion. It's a light green day, edges toward the lion, towards the lion and up to the lion. But how is one to get out of the lion? One's hat and stick sticking out of the lion, around the lion and with the lion. You ran away from the lion and away from the lion, amazed and apart, days away from the lion, towards the lion and up to the lion, around the lion and with the lion. And when I was speaking with David on his birthday this year, he often, as I'm sure was true for all of you, would recite poems that were moving through his mind. And for many, I mean, for the last few years, I wander lonely as a map, which is so, it's so beautiful. And he recited this poem to me when we last spoke. He said, be happy, and the main thing is not to be afraid of anything. And then he spoke, the anguish is too much, I would like to be much. The whole world is a narrow dream, the whole world is a dream, rigid. A dream without a ledge, a very narrow scream. The main thing is not to be afraid of anything. The main thing is not to be afraid of anything.
Mm.
So I hope, please rest in peace, David. Thank you.
Mark, did you say Stacy's reading next?
I think we were asked if Lauren and Stan could come in because they have to leave. Lauren, Stan, are you guys with us?
Here. Thank you for including us. Lauren and I became David and Lindsay's neighbors a few years ago. Lindsay, you may not know this, but
David was one of the broker's selling points. And when we came to look at the apartment, they said there's a musician on the floor, there's a dancer on the floor, and there's a very famous poet. So we were not able to negotiate, and we had to offer asking price. My business is a chocolate business, and occasionally I give my neighbors some chocolate, and David was particularly appreciative of this. And every time that we would leave a little gift on the Shapiro's door, the next day there would be a book on our doorstep. So we have a large Shapiro collection that he gave us, and one time he wrote a poem, which I obviously won't be able to see here. This is what he left us. Wild Chocolate was the poem. Let's see, it was wild. We also foraged stuff in the woods, so he wrote wild chocolate, mushrooms and fruit and thorns, and wild tame chocolate is hard to find, falling like sudden woods, sudden chocolate, oh poisoned love. Wild chocolate, hard is easy to find in the winter, or hard, your fruit, your joy, wild chocolate. And I wanted to read something that I wrote some time ago, just that brought David to mind. For me, one of the things that, the way I sort of think of him, the mind that is so active and so incredible, that the past was as present to him as the present, and the present was as present to him as the present, and the future was present. Everything was all there. It was one layer. This is something I wrote on a different subject, but it did remind me. A breeze ruffles leaves, and the sun dapples through. Cicadas unspool their reliable chuzz. Some forests are old, some forests are new, and so much that is, it was. The trail might be thorny, the compass askew. So I pray for the soul who is underprepared. He may wander the woods or be caged in a zoo, and in either place be scared. I looked at a picture I long ago knew, till beauty and sadness became the same sound. I realized that yesterday is today too, and something I'd lost, I'd found. For even when love is hidden from view, or the place where it was lays barren and bare, if once on that spot it ever grew, it can blossom again right there. How fast it all goes, we've never a clue. The time disappears in an unforeseen whiz. But now the sun shines and the sky is blue, and so much that was still is.
Thank you, Steve. I think we've got who's up next, Joanna? I think is it Lawrence Weeder, his old friend?
Right.
Lawrence, are you with us still?
I know Tim Liu also wants to read, and just Vincent Katz is joining the Zoom in a minute.
Okay, Vincent will be great. So we've got Jim Pericone, Charles, I'm going to say your name wrong, Susan Yelovich, Chris Foss, Lawrence Weeder, and Michelle Govrini. I'm sorry, I'm reading off my own bad handwriting. So let's go to Lawrence Weeder. Are you unmuted? My bad, Lawrence. Here we go. Oh, and
that should do it?
Yeah.
Okay. It's wonderful to hear David's voice in so many mouths. And I was sitting here thinking that he was kind of, he had the ability to lift everybody up, like an ark in a flood. The last walk I took with him was to the park just up the hill from his apartment. Henry Hudson looks at the Hudson. Henry Hudson turned to me and said, "Be expressionless and strong as me. Be grim and green, stout as Cortez. Double lock yourself within like a warning wife and be divorced from nothing. At last, be a statue of a self and threaten at night like a landing. Turn to your river like a monist on a raft and always found your river on a fault. Be blind and copper, a mania on a column, obscured finally by a single cloud of brick. I love you. That is why I do not talk about your humorous desire to appease. Rather complain, like a man, that there is no river." And this was David's favorite psalm, 134. Late. A scholar at his desk at midnight looked up from his book, beyond the lamplight, into a socked-in yard where gray wisps swirled between clotheslines, and said, "Blessed be the creator of this world." Thank you.
Amen to that, Lawrence. Thank you. Chris Voss. Chris.
Now, how about now?
Yeah,
Can
you got it. You're good.
Oh, good. Good. Hi, Mark. Hi, Catherine. Sending love to everybody on this in this session, and especially Lindsay and Daniel. My deepest sympathies. I was actually in a state of shock when I heard that David had died, and angry at myself for not having had the chance to run over and see him more often in recent years. Anyway, I just thought I'd quickly do something impossible, which I hope you all forgive me for, even though I have to rush off to an optical exam because Warby Parker gave me bum glasses that aren't working for me, so everything's a blur. Of course, David might think that's a positive in some way, but I just wrote a quick poem a few minutes ago before the session, and I will quickly try to find it and read it to you. Oops, there we go. It's called What's This for David Shapiro. David, mesmerizing, mischievous sage. If Kenneth Koch would teach his students how to unlearn prose in order to write poetry, David, you would teach us how to relearn it, but in a way that suggested you might be on drugs. A little craziness goes a long way, he might say. Like the rain become pillars, he wrote. I think someone read the poem and I got it wrong, even if he didn't quite say it that way. If I told David I tried to write a poem in 5 minutes, I know what would happen. He would reply, well, I wrote one once while riding a bicycle. One of those David Shapiro non sequiturs I loved. Then I imagined he'd say something brilliant about the muse, call it musing, which of course makes perfect sense. Then he'd muse that the muse works very quickly in some cases. There, some legitimacy, although David would not be capable, I think, of using that dreadful word. Never pedantic, the pedagogue, David, pseudo-academic, whatever that means. He'd hand over his latest ditties into friends' hands at every party. And while the word genius is a silly one, it applies to David, except in David's case, insouciance was the secret sauce. The sheer mountain of knowledge his brain possessed often emerged in the form of hilarious quips of literary gossip. Yes, he made the most of a charming insecurity vis-a-vis other poets, riffing naughtily about them. The quips weren't untrue, even as funny as they were. He'd make your stomach hurt. You taught me so much, David, so many bright irrelevancies. Hearing you teach was fun, full of strange asides about the poets you were trying to inform your students about. No, never a lecture, more like witty palaver over lunch. When you spoke of Ginsberg, Coke, you did so as if you had ultimate knowledge, intimate knowledge, maybe ultimate too, of each. Again, you made seemingly irrelevant central, the irrelevant central, thereby keeping your students awake and bedazzled. The thing is, this was true when you discoursed in a manner of speaking on the likes of Stevens, Rutke, Eliot, or Shakespeare. David, I told you Cal Lowell once told me when I told him I liked Eliot's Sweeney Agonistes that he, Lowell, had been told by Eliot he had a tin ear. David proceeded to come at me with a new technical term, one I'd never heard of before, stickomythia, which was related, of course, to Sweeney Agonistes, one exchange in Sweeney. You see this egg? You see this egg? That's life on a crocodile isle. Did you, David, you were a magician poet, a professor of beauty and heart. The delight I took in listening to one of your riffs made my day, carried the ensuing weeks and months. I will miss your mischievous glint and smile, the sheer naughtiness as you took down anything or anyone too highfalutin. I wasn't there at the time at Columbia in '68, but that shot of you perched on Columbia's president's oversized chair, I think it was, perched there like the child you were, like all of us are, except most of us won't admit it. In that high chair, you sported a cigar wedged between your teeth, as though a miniature version of Castro. I hope the cigar was Cuban, David. After that insane day with David all antinomian, speaking to poetry to power, Columbia was never the same, and yet they let you teach there not long after. Thank you for your beautifully mind-sharpened poems, for that smile. Thank you for putting the L for love in literature, the P for presumptuous in poetry. Ouch. You might just tell me, no, flaunt it, baby. I'm sure you were a fan of Zero Mostel and the producers. So what is this? My presumptuous paean to David. He would like how it was rushed, I think, and encourage me to rush more. Kenneth Koch, on the other hand, would tell me, rush home and start again. I suppose free association is never entirely free. David, for your fans, your friends, and of course your family who adore you, who worship you, I can tell you missing you hurts, even though it brings you near. And when in the future life gets weirder still, unwholesome, I'll take a cue from your resistance to that sort of thing. I'll read some of your poems, maybe write you in response, maybe not so rushed. Your piercing love of what matters and what doesn't will, I hope, revisit me.
Thanks, Chris. Good to see you.
Judith Silverman is going to read next.
Hi, I'm not going to read. I'm David's, am I on?
Yes.
Yeah, Judy, you're
I'm
on.
David's oldest sister, and by 4 years, always such a tragedy when a sibling dies, and even worse when the sibling is younger. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity to meet all of the people that David talked about so often and to hear his poems read so well. And I know that David loved you all. He mostly loved Lindsay and Daniel and was very grateful for his family. Some of the memories I have of David are a little different than yours, because as an older sister, He was a pain in the neck some of the times, but I do remember that David used to collect all the rejections that he got from magazines because he thought they were so thoughtful and well written, and he would learn from them. And he had notebooks filled from editors who refused to accept his work. This was when he was 7 and 10 and 12. So it was a pleasure when things finally came through and they were being accepted. I also remember a time when David decided as a young teenager he wanted to learn Greek, and he locked himself in his room and decided to teach himself Greek. I found it challenging to understand his poetry, and he was always so sympathetic and said, don't worry about what you think it should mean. Whatever the rhythm of the music of the words and the juxtapositions of different things means to you, that's what's really important. I always enjoyed reading his prose as well, and was struck by how close he felt poetry was to music, whether he was writing about the Holocaust or Proverbs or writing about art. And we learned so much from him about every endeavor he studied. He came to the Washington area to curate a show at the Hirshhorn and took some friends of ours around as he curated the show. And they could not believe everything they learned from David and would talk about it for years. So he's going to be incredibly missed by not just the people gathered here today and by his family, but many, many other people. And I would like to personally thank Lindsay and Daniel for the extraordinary care they gave to David over this terrible illness that he endured for many years. Thank you for letting me speak.
Like Naomi is gonna read next. Oh wait, I would speak next. I just have to. I'm not sure if she's.
Wait, I thought I had that.
I think I just unmuted.
Okay.
I'm very grateful for everyone's reading, and the names of the people are all names that I grew up with and heard. Larry Weeder, Philip Lopate, and just Ron Padgett. I went to poetry readings that David gave, and I grew up with him. And so I took walks to Weequahic Park when we would play tennis together, and he would read me a poem that he had just written, and he would tell me what it meant. And then we would discuss it. And sometimes he would say, like to Judy, it doesn't matter what it means. And so I have memories of playing music with him. We played chamber music, and he was the first violinist, and we fought with our bows, and we breathed together. And I'm very grateful for everyone's reading. And it's a terrible, terrible, terrible loss. And of course, I'm thankful for Lindsay and Daniel, who took care of him and loved him and spent so many years with him. So thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Noam.
I think because you mentioned tennis court, I think Charles Borkus should read next because he was going to read the.
Right.
Great. Okay.
There you go, Charles.
Thank you. This has been just a wonderful celebration for David, and he and I shared many hour-long plus phone conversations, and in those and so many other things, I can imagine his fluid, agile mind that was so rich and generous and constantly moving between associations, digressions that were all part of an enormous, ongoing, brilliant poem. What I'm going to read is from A Burning Interior, and this is on a tennis court. Playing without a net's not such a bad idea. And what if the emperor's clothes were a good idea, as the painter said to me? Playing tennis in the dark, a lot like poetry. Playing tennis in autumn leaves, is that too much like poetry? Tennis is a game, therefore not poetry. Nor is it a dream, the opposite of stupidity. but it is the articulatory dance of the speech organs. You play it in a field, the visual field, without an eye. You play it against a wall. It rebounds endlessly. By day, you are a tennis player. By night, the famous other awakes to brass and violins. That white out, you and me, the friends dispersed. You engrave the tennis court, enmeshed like bottles. The net flaps like a melancholy faith. Only the businessman is confident, like an old meter, lilting, playing tennis without a net. Not such a poor idea. Playing tennis in the dark is a lot like poetry. Thank you.
Thank you. I think our next is Michael. Michael, go for it.
Yeah, my name is Michal Govrin.
Michael, apologies.
Michal. Yeah. And I'm very, very, very moved by this session, and I thank you so much. It's late at night. I'm speaking to you from Jerusalem. So we are 7 hours ahead of you. One of the great blessings of my life was meeting with David. We had many years of friendship with Lindsay and Daniel that I really send my feelings to. It was David Rosenberg who introduced us. We were in the same group with Harold Schimmel, which is a wonderful poet, and I just saw his video reading 3 pages that he wrote for David here in Jerusalem, and with Gabriel Levine. I will evoke those classes where I gave lectures at David's poetry classes at the Cooper Union, always stopping by at the John Hejduk's office before, and that these were amazing afternoons with a group of students. Very often Jacques Derrida would come to listen to me and to David, and to the amazement of David asking him, Jacques, how do you feel about all this Jewish stuff? Because we were speaking about these crazy architectural structures like the stucca, this temporary memorial little hut that one constructs in the fall. And this year, unfortunately, the war started at that day. I also will evoke David's only visit to Israel with my invitation. And as we walked through the alleys of the neighborhood next to mine, we passed by the garden of Gershom Scholem, which was an abandoned house at that time. And among the shrubs and everything, there was one bush of roses with amazing, huge roses, and that David kept referring to as the secret rose of Gershom Scholem that he saw in Jerusalem. I'll read one short poem from our joint book, which is called Body of Prayer, a joint book that was constructed by Jim Skapish, by David Shapiro, myself, and Jacques Derrida. And of course, the title Body of Prayer is of David, and it was also part of an event at the Cooper Union with a hall full of students sitting on the floor, in the chairs, on the windows, and etc. This is a poem that David said that he wrote that morning, just before our session. It's called Winter Work. A dog prays for me. He barks inside all day. What little inside there is, like a pigeon. Help. He kneels for his king one night, kind owner, Ayeka. All is kind, all is cruel. A dog sprayed, obeyed, sprayed. In the forest now, he moans for help. In some of his languages, no one. The addressee slips away, has slipped away, but the dog thinks. The dog thanks you in the desert. In the desert of the desert, you have left a trace. Thank you so much for making that. I was listening with tears in my eyes, listening to David's poems and being filled with his lines as of many, many years of great friendship between my family, my husband. He wrote a poem about my husband, Chaim Brezi, the mathematician, and our daughters, and Lindsay and Daniel. Thank you so much for bringing that world of poetry at Lines all the way to Jerusalem. Thank you.
Next up is Timothy Liu.
Hi. I had the privilege to be colleagues with David at William Patterson University for almost 20 years. And he was really one of the great teachers, not only in the classroom, but just in conversation all the time. And I used to pack my lunch and every week head over to his office. And I don't think there was a single conversation I had with him where he didn't mention Lindsay and David, not David, Daniel several times. And he was always part of, he was always bringing his love for everything in his